Good?
Yeah.
Okay, for the people standing in the back, there are 3 seats right up here, in case you want to sit. Up here. There are seats. Well, again, thanks, Bill, and thanks to the Goshen Library for inviting me to this lecture series. I'm kind of awestruck by how many people are interested in this topic. That's great. Just to mention, because he's sitting right in front of me, is my colleague, Professor Corey Harris, who is a professor of anthropology at SUNY Orange. Kind of took over for me a number of years ago when I retired. And so for those of you seriously interested in archaeology and prehistory, Corey teaches an excellent course in that at SUNY Orange, so you might consider taking that sometime. Corey's right over here. I'd like to thank all my friends who've come today. Really appreciate that. All the friends as well from the from the Orange County chapter of the New York State Archaeological Association who are here today. I really appreciate that as well. And I just hope that I'm interesting and good, because the thought of all you people booing at once is very unsettling. So I will give you my presentation, and then there'll be some time for questions and answers. And I know a lot of you are very concerned about this archaeological site and its present and future. Be happy to answer any questions you might have. So let's go. Well, there we go. And there I am. And the only thing I don't like about this picture that I'm projecting to you is that it looks like Ice Age hunters, which they are. However, they're wearing loose cloaks. And a little later on, I'm going to talk about an incredible invention that happened during the Ice Age, and that is the eyed bone needle and form-fitting clothing. So they should be wearing more like what the Inuit people would be wearing up in the frozen north. But that's just a little detail, right? Okay. So pardon me. We will begin with some thoughts about the early migration of humans out of Africa and how people ultimately arrived here in the Americas. So beginning, yikes, wrong one. Laser pointer is this one. So here's Africa, and Africa is well known as the hearthland of humanity. The earliest humans, going way back before modern humans, first evolved in Africa, ancient Australopithecines and so on. It's not the topic of today's talk. But by around 65, 70 million years ago, modern Homo sapiens, that's us, had evolved in Africa as well, North and Eastern Africa and so on. And although the dates are very hard to determine with any specificity, by around 65,000 years ago, not million, but 1,000 years ago, modern humans began to migrate out of Africa into Europe, into Asia, where they confronted earlier hominin populations. Hominins are members of our own human lineage. Early members of Homo erectus, Neanderthals in Europe, a very unknown and very mysterious form of human known only genetically as Denisovians here in Southeast Asia, and so on. And so through these migrations, ultimately migrating farther and farther to the north, at this point here was a land bridge, because this was during the latter stages of the Ice Age. And so with the vast amounts of moisture locked up into glaciers, this created tremendous pressures on landforms and sucked up so much water that the ocean levels fell significantly, 300-400 feet compared to where they are today. And so as a result, the Bering Straits, which exist today, at that time, roughly 20,000 years ago or so, was actually a major land connection between Asia and the Americas. And so by this time, 16,000 years ago here, crossing over Beringia, the land bridge here, first human beings began to migrate into the Americas. I'll talk more about this, which route they might have taken shortly. But the only human beings ever to reach the Americas here, North, Central, South America, were modern humans as we are. and also Australia and the islands of the Pacific were inhabited first by moderns. Europe and Asia by earlier forms of humanity, but the Americas, where we certainly are today, only by modern human beings. So here we see on this map, which I took from an older textbook actually, a number of years ago, we see actually Duchess Quarry is actually mentioned here, which is a bit unusual for early textbooks, but there it is, okay, so I wanted to show you guys that. And here is Beringia up here, and so how did these early humans ultimately wind up in the northeast of the United States? You see major glacial ice caps here, the Laurentian ice cap here, Cordilleran ice cap here, and so geologists proposed that sometime after 20,000 years ago, through glacial melting, glaciers are still melting in this world, a corridor opened up, and that through Beringia, early migrating hunters, gatherers, foragers moved down through this corridor and spread out into the Americas. Duchess Quarry in the northeast, major sites here in the southwest and so forth, Folsom and so on, and then all the way down this way. So this has been debated, this migratory pattern, because another probably more likely route for the habitation of the Americas is a seacoast route, which we can see here. So instead of braving the ice, because you can't imagine, unless you've seen glaciers yourself in Alaska, my wife and I have recently seen glaciers there, and where else did we see glaciers? Somewhere else. Alaska, or just basically Alaska, I think. Not my backyard. Anyway, it's hard to imagine the absolutely brutal conditions of living anywhere near these massive continental glaciers thousands of years ago. And so migrating through a narrow corridor between huge ice sheets doesn't seem that likely. It's possible, but not likely. More likely, following a coastal route. This is called the Kelp Highway, where there's lots of fish and seafood and so on and so on. Following the coast down this way, and then, you know, hitting land and migrating inland this way, as you can see here, following the coast all the way down. And so by the time we get to southern South America, there's a site called the Monte Verde site in Chile, which is at least 12,500 years old, probably even older than that, maybe 14,000 years. So how in the world did early migrating humans get so far south as, you know, Monte Verde in Chile at this very early date? So one of the mysteries of American archaeology is what routes did these early humans take, modern Homo sapiens as we are, to move throughout the Americas? Through this ice-free corridor, or down this way, and there are even some, although this is not a well-substantiated hypothesis in modern American archaeology, maybe even coming from Europe, along the coast of Greenland, and then down here in this way, but that's another possible route, but not well substantiated. So this is what the ice might have looked like. Now, where we are today, geographically speaking, the farthest extent of the ice by around 20,000 years ago, the Wisconsin glaciation, was in northern New Jersey. And then it began to gradually melt. The earth started warming. It still is warming, hottest year we've ever had on record, you know, so it's getting warmer and warmer. But that's mostly through human intervention. Let's not talk politics here, though. Okay. And anyway, the glaciers started melting and receding north, but hard to envision because other than maybe the interior of Greenland, no one's ever seen massive continental ice sheets as existed many times in the past over the last million or so years. And so where we are now, the point of the glacier would have been maybe around where New Paltz is today, something like that, as it was slowly, gradually melting and receding to the north and releasing huge quantities of water as it did so, but very slowly and gradually, okay? Not like a big flood coming down, but, you know, inches a year receding northward. So nothing would be living, you know, yikes. nothing would be living, very close to the ice masses, way too inhospitable. But then maybe 15, 20 miles to the south, that's where you begin to pick up new ecological zones. Arctic tundra, to the south of that, boreal forest, mostly fir and spruce and so forth. And that was the environmental habitat of the earliest humans who lived at Dutchess Quarry. So I took this picture a number of months ago at the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. And anyway, this is what you would have seen in your backyard a few thousand years ago. You looked out your window and you would have seen, well, not so much a mammoth, because this elephantine creature was found more out in the west, but you would have seen plenty of mastodons here because they're all over the place in this area. You would have seen huge bison, extinct rather, sorry. Huge bison. This creature is called something like a glyphodont. It's like a huge tortoise-like being. You would have seen horses, okay, who disappeared at most of these creatures disappeared at the end of the Ice Age, the extinction of the megafauna, as it's called. You would have seen camels. Does anybody know where camels survive today in the Americas? Well, they survive in South America. Those creatures like llamas, sorry gringos, you don't say llama, it's llamas, alpacas, vicunas, and there's a fourth one, a little camelid, guanacos. Those are camelids. They are survivors of the camels that were native to the Americas until the end of the Ice Age. You would have seen saber-toothed cats. You would have kept one as a little kitty in your house, I suppose, back then. Okay, you would have seen really nasty wolves, dire wolves. All right. Oh, by the way, all these things are seeking to eat you as well. What these were, I tried to look it up, but I couldn't quite remember the name of them. But look at these awful looking things. Giant ground sloths. There's a giant ground sloth. What this creature is, I just don't recall. What? Oh, thank you. I just couldn't remember it. Glomphothere?
Glomphothere.
Thanks a lot. Glomphothere, apparently. Thank you. Okay. So we all love mastodons. I do anyway. Wish I had one as a pet. So here we go. Now in Orange County, this is like the center of mastodons in the world. So many mastodons have come out of the Black Dirt region, Pine Island region, and elsewhere in this area. You, of course, can see them here in Orange County. There's the sugarloaf mastodon at the Biotech building at SUNY Orange, which I'm very familiar with. There is the type skeleton of all at the Museum of Natural History, the Warren mastodon. There is the mastodon, I think it's the arboreal one, but Doc, what is the name of the mastodon at the Museum Village? Do you recall? But anyway, there's a mastodon there, so you can actually see mastodons right here in our own backyard, especially at SUNY Orange and at Museum Village and Museum of Natural History in New York. So no mastodon finds were discovered whatsoever in the Dutchess Quarry Caves, so this is a little bit of a digression, but they were all over the place back then with the early human inhabitants. So this one is the type, this is the Warren mastodon. This was found outside the town of Newburgh in the 1800s, I think 1868 or something like that, but don't quote me on that date exactly. But this is viewed as the typical mastodon of its time, and again, it's at Museum of Natural History in New York. And here is a mastodon, and here are mammoths. And even though they're cousins closely related to elephants, they are different creatures. This one was a browser, and this one was a grazer. So mastodons ate bushes and branches, and, aspects of trees, fruits, and so forth and so on. Mammoths, on the other hand, grazed the low vegetation along the ground, grasses and so forth. And you can see that by looking at their molar patterns. So here is a mastodon tooth with its sharp ridges, rough chewing surface with cusps, in order to break up all that tough vegetation from trees and branches and so on. And here's much more a smoother tooth, mammoth tooth, molar tooth, with flat chewing surface just to grind down the grasses. So that's one way you can always tell the difference between a mastodon and a mammoth skeleton or fossil. So more views of the environment, going back now to roughly 12,000 years ago, during the earliest inhabitation by humanity, the Dutchess Quarry Caves and other sites in this region. Okay, and here are some, these are called moose elk. I guess the moose and the elk had a thing going with each other. You know, for some reason in the paleontological journals and so forth, they're referred to as moose elk. Okay. Oh my God. Okay. Love the one you're with. And we're talking about giant creatures. So that's one of the characteristics of post-glacial times to the end of the Ice Age, were these huge creatures. Megafauna, we refer to them. The mammoths, the mastodons, the giant ground sloths. There were giant beavers as well, and giant cats, and giant bears, giants, just about everything. Human beings were normal size, though. We weren't giants back then. And then one of the great mysteries of North American archaeology is what happened to this megafauna towards the end of the Ice Age. It basically disappeared. There were some survivors up to the north. We still find muskox, and we still find caribou. In the old world, as with Scandinavia, they're called reindeer. Here in North America, we refer to the same animal as caribou. So they managed to survive, but so many, no one knows exactly why they survived. Maybe different breeding patterns or something. But anyway, most of these creatures disappeared at the end of the Ice Age. Did they disappear because they were hunted by these early migrating humans? You know, when creatures are not familiar with us, they don't realize how vicious and brutal we are. Right? It's like those creatures of the Galapagos. When first discovered, they had no fear of human beings whatsoever because they had never had to confront human hunters. And so maybe the megafauna had no fear of humans, not realizing how deadly we are with our tools and weapons and hunting organization and so forth. So did human beings contribute to the end of the megafauna? Was it basically climactic environmental change, or a combination of both is most likely? Both contributed. Now when I say giant beaver, I'm serious. One beaver would make a nice, for my wife, a nice coat. Find one giant beaver. That's not me, by the way. So here is a famous caribou. Now we want to emphasize the caribou because caribou bones were found in one of the major archaeological sites at Dutchess Quarry 1, and were carbon dated. I'll tell you more about that shortly. And so the caribou bones are especially significant as far as the archaeological sites and their dating. So again, reindeer in the old world, caribou here in the new world. There's some Chile caribou. And this creature is called a flat-headed peccary. So bones of the flat-headed peccary, which is another creature that went extinct at the end of the Ice Age, were found as well in Dutchess Quarry 1. All of this identified by David Stedman, who was a New York State paleontologist back in the 1980s. So that's how we have identified the bones of these creatures. Were they hunted by early humans at Dutchess Quarry, or wound up there, brought into these caves and rock shelter overhangs by predators? No one's for sure, but most likely brought in by predators and not by humans. This is kind of really dated, but I wanted to give everybody a sense of prehistory in this region of the Northeast. And so we start out with what's called the Paleo-Indian stage or period. Okay, and this goes back 12,000 BP, BP before present, 10,000 years ago if you use a BC AD system. But archaeologists tend not to use the BC AD system because it's too culture bound and restricted to Christianity. Sorry, Christians, don't get angry. But not everything in this world is dated to before and after the birth of Christ. And so scientists try to avoid that kind of bias and dating and use more of a BP, before present system. So 2000 is present, we're shaving off just 24 years. So 2000, and take that back to 0, and 0 back, to 10,000, so 12,000 years BP. So here's the Paleo-Indian age, and these are the first occupants of the Americas, were the Paleo-Indians. After the Paleo-Indians and the end of the Ice Age, by around 10,000, by about 8,000 BP, okay, then we begin a new period called the Archaic period. And this period is a time of environmental shifts away from Ice Age environments, away from tundra and a boreal forest, and more gradualistically towards the broadleaf forests, oak and maple and so forth that we see today. And so as the environment shifted, so did human cultures have to shift more towards the exploitation of plants and smaller animals like rabbits and deer as the large fauna disappeared. So the Archaic is a time of transition, very long period of time, by the way, many thousands of years. But archaeologists refer to this time as a time of hunter-gatherer foragers becoming more and more tuned into the resources of modernizing climates. And then we have a transitional time and the beginning of the woodland. And the woodland was a time in which the knowledge of plant, not so much animal, probably they had domesticated dogs at this point for sure, but domesticated plants arrived in the Northeast. Having first been domesticated way down in Central America, maybe even South America, some domestication like the potato, but basically Central America, Indian maize, beans, and squash, and chili peppers. And so the knowledge of domestication, spreading slowly and gradually over 1,000 years, finally reached the northeast of the United States by around roughly, 1,000, by 3,000 years ago, 1,000 BP, BC if you prefer that, as you can see right over here. And so this was a time in which the hunter-gatherer foragers began to settle down, build villages, more permanent settlements, develop pottery and other more advancements that were part of native indigenous cultures when first contacted by Europeans around 1500 AD. Okay, so that's the woodland phase. We're mostly interested in the Paleo-Indian phase, although we'll see that artifacts from all these other periods, Archaic and woodland, also were discovered at the Dutchess Quarry Caves, which makes it such an important archaeological site and resource. This is not Dutchess Quarry, but this is a diorama at the New York State Museum in Albany from another site called the West Athens Hillside, I believe, West Athens Hill. And to me, it looks just about what you would have seen at Dutchess Quarry if you had been there, 12,000 or so years ago. Notice the form-fitting clothing. Okay, it's so important to adaptation to brutally cold post-glacial conditions. Notice the caribou kill over here with the spear or atlatl thrust right over here. So when I show you pictures of the actual cave site themselves, envision this as far as what you would have likely seen thousands of years ago if you had been there yourself. I'm not sure why I'm showing you this, other than I like it. I always love pictures of ancient people and so forth and so on. But actually, these are not mastodons, these are mammoths, I'm pretty sure. They're curved tusks like that. And here's a hunter, but he's holding a spear. Here's one of those glyptodont creatures. Okay. He most likely should be holding a spear thrower, which I'll tell you about shortly as a very important aspect of technology. So I took these pictures at the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City a few months ago, and I like to refer to this as lunch. So, get a little hungry? Go ahead and kill yourself a big elephant before it kills you. One or the other. So, to paraphrase the philosopher Hobbes, life must have been rather short, nasty, and brutish back then. So let's give thanks to all the wonderful comforts and amenities of our modern lives, right? You want lunch? Make yourself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Back then, you want lunch? Go kill an elephant. There you go. This poor guy's taking a nap, he got tired. So, the sites themselves. Actually, one site with several caves. So here's Goshen, where we are. Okay, here's 17A, going down towards Warwick. Okay, this is Pulaski Highway here. This is Quarry Road over here. And here's the remnants of former Lookout Mountain, Mount Lookout right over here. So here is a huge hole from quarry blasting. Okay, I can't tell you exactly where the caves are because if you found out, I'd have to kill you. So we don't feel like that. Too early. I'm not going to tell you exactly where they are. But the caves are up in this area around here. Okay, land over here, part of a slope leading up to an escarpment over here. And this is the blasting area for what used to be Dutchess Quarry. Now it's called Tilcon. Tilcon bought them out. So this is the area that we'll be talking about. And here we can see, okay, here's Dutchess Quarry Caves, Lookout Mountain here. And what's really important about this is the black dirt area right over here. Right on the edge of the black dirt area is Florida, Goshen here. And so the Dutchess Quarry Caves, there are two basic ones. They were probably lookout points for game wandering through the very lush and fertile black dirt area below. It wasn't black dirt then, it was glacial swamp and marsh and muck filled with vegetation, from melting glaciers to the north. Lakes had been forming and so on and so forth. So this is prime hunting territory. The black dirt area back then before it became drained and turned into farmland as it is today. So that's why the location of the caves is so important as a lookout point for this area over here. I took this picture many years ago, give you a sense of what it might have been like during post-glacial times, over 12,000 years ago. The ledge is a little steep and rocky. This is a summer picture, looking at the black dirt region below, which at that time, once again, I want to stress was marshland and muckland and swamps and occasional stands of fir trees and spruce trees and cold adapted trees such as that, boreal forest trees. This is Dutchess Quarry 1. This cave was first excavated in the early 1960s by the Orange County chapter of the New York State Archaeological Association in conjunction with the New York State archaeologist and his team, Dr. Robert Funk. For many years, the local archaeologists had heard rumors about an archaeological site up on Lookout Mountain. Boy Scouts had been camping there and so forth, and so this is before my time. I got to SUNY Orange in 1969 after these initial excavations. But I knew all the people at that time that did these excavations, Bill Ehlers and George Walters and so forth. And so they introduced me to this site soon after I started teaching at SUNY Orange, my anthropology and archaeology courses. And so this is what it looks like today. Okay. That's the interior. Been pretty much thoroughly excavated or tested at this point. And Dr. Funk, he passed away a number of years ago, he gave me a number of pictures from the early excavations, which I've used in my classes and these kinds of presentations for many years. So I was not there myself, but these are some of the archaeologists, local archaeologists who actually went there on weekends and did an incredible amount of work clearing rock and rubble weekend after weekend after weekend. I mean, really heavy-duty labor, clearing all that rock and rubble to get down to zones where they could begin excavations. You see this orange line over here was actually the top of the rock and rubble, and they cleared all that down to here where they could begin their subsurface excavations. So these are historical pictures that few people have ever seen, but now you have. Incidentally, there had been rumors that there was a major archaeological site on the other side of Lookout Mountain, the blasting zone today, that had been blasted into oblivion, by the mining operations, and that was actually where people actually lived. But that site was long gone by the time archaeologists began their excavations. These sites, as I will tell you, were not living sites per se, domestic sites, but probably where hunters were stationed in order to survey the black dirt region below and look for migrating herds of caribou or wandering mastodon or whatever they were looking for. They were probably lookout stations. Going the wrong way. So here you see the excavations in progress. Up at the top, whoops. Up at the top here is what we call a shaking box. It's a box with wire mesh. You put all the material from any excavation layer in the shaking box, shake it out. All the loose rubble falls out, and whatever artifacts are found in the dirt would remain in the box to be found and identified. So there's a shaking box up here. Okay, they're excavating down there. And again, these are just ordinary people like you and me who on weekends decided, well, I want to go there and dig like crazy and find all this incredible stuff. These avocational archaeologists. Give them an enormous amount of credit. There's that shaking box up at the top. It's Duchess Quarry 1. So this is George Walters, who's passed away a long time ago. But I interviewed him many years ago extensively for an article I was writing for the Orange County Historical Society's journal. And I think he gave me this picture perhaps, and he said that it was just, he said that it was just about at this point, this is what we call stratum 2, I'll show you more about that shortly, where we found a very famous discovery, a fluted point. I'll tell you more about shortly. The major archaeological discovery of all was probably his first fluted point. Again, I'll describe it shortly. Found just about where he's pointing. So, a very important discovery. So, for those of you who want further torture, there's a YouTube video which you can find called Kass, Duchess Quarry Caves Tour, and I'm actually giving you a tour at Duchess Quarry 1 over here, so you can listen to me again, cure for insomnia. So anyway, if you're so interested, you can go to YouTube and find, it's I think 6 minutes long, it's not too long. So, Duchess Quarry 1. Okay. Plan of Duchess Quarry 1 showing the location of artifacts within the deposits. So there's a possible, so here's the opening of the cave right over here. Here's a possible feature, which might have been a fire hearth, which makes sense because it was so darn cold. And if you're sitting there looking out for game, you might as well have a fire going, which makes perfectly good sense. So the discovery of the fluted point right over here, going towards the back of the cave. Other points were found, Brewerton side notch points, more from archaic times and later woodland times, like these Ladonna points over here, I will show you. Bone awl, side scraper, antler point found here, bone needle, very, very important, found as well in these locations. Very little found towards the back of the cave. Test pits were dug here. Deep test pit was dug somewhere around here. go down to bedrock, and again, they didn't find anything below what was called stratum 2, where this fluted point was found, not far from the surface. So here's a side view, okay? And here's the opening of the cave here, and stratum 2, right over here, white earth and rubble, found right about here. Here, this is where that fluted point was found. And then later archaeological materials from archaic and woodland times found closer to the surface up here. The test pit dug here, nothing found. Test pit here towards the back of the cave, nothing really found. So it was all the cultural resources, archaeological materials found not too far from the opening of the cave.
How far back does the cave go?
Not too far back, and it begins to narrow and gets constricted. Maybe, I'm going to guess, because I haven't been there in a while, maybe 20 feet. Something like that. It's really not too big. More like a rock shelter than a cave. I mean, a little bit of a cave, but more like a rock shelter site. So, here is the famous fluted point. And for those of you so interested, I have a facsimile of it. You can come over and take a look afterward. Show you. So this is the most famous discovery of all from Dutchess Quarry 1. Other points were found from later times. This is the tip, number 22, of a deer antler point. So interestingly enough, and very important in terms of archaeology, we tend to think of the Stone Age, stone tools. But the farther back in time you go, the much less likely organic materials are to survive. Stone is going to survive, but wood, no, not so much. Bone, no, not so much. And so certainly our ancestors used a whole repertoire of wood and bone, to make their implements and their tools, but very little of that survives, being in the ground for thousands of years. But in the case of Dutchess Quarry 1, organic materials did survive, which is a very remarkable thing indeed. So here we have the tip of a point made out of a deer antler point. Okay, here we have, this is so important, see the eye right there? Bone needles and awls to drill holes in animal skins, so you can actually make form-fitting clothing. And that was a huge step forward, technologically speaking, in the ability of early humans to adapt to cold climates. I mean, the Neanderthals somehow did quite well living in cold Europe, for tens of thousands of years, wearing, just some kind of loose cloaks of skin and fur. But much better would be what the Inuit people, we used to call them the Eskimo, now they're the Inuit people, do. And that is those parkas and their mukluks and their, I don't even remember, their form-fitting clothing was called. A much better way to survive in the cold, right? And so this was a major invention of what we call the Upper Paleolithic. In Europe, as well as here in the Americas, the eye, bone, needle, and form-fitting clothing was a tremendous step forward in human adaptability and the capacity to move even into northern regions and climates and adapt and survive, as with Siberia, and then ultimately crossing the Bering Straits and somehow or other moving down throughout the Americas. So the eye, bone, needle is very, very important in that regard. We have here as well drills, again to make holes in perhaps furs and clothing. This is a deer sternum, breastbone, which was used as a deflesher and scraper, again to prepare hides for clothing, most likely. And here we have other kinds of points from later times, archaic and woodland times, and up at the very top here, we have what are called Levana points, and these are points very much like those that were made by people like the Iroquois when contacted by the first Europeans. So we see a continuity of archaeological cultures going all the way back to Paleo times, going all the way back to Paleo. Thanks. Where am I? I'm lost. Help me. There we go. Sorry, folks. I'm human, cut me out of key. I think. Anyway, all the way from Paleo times, all the way through archaic times, all the way up to woodland times and contact times. That's one of the aspects scientifically that makes the Dutchess Quarry site so important, is this continuity of cultures ranging over many thousands of years. This is just a coloration of that last picture. Okay, so you can see very clearly more so the bone materials. And here I just wanted to compare and contrast an Inuit with this kind of form-fitting clothing, which I've spoken about at length now, with, I think these must be Neanderthals, living somewhere in Europe maybe 40, 50,000 years ago, and certainly look chilly to me. Here we have, as found in the topper layers of Dutchess Quarry 1, Levana-type points, late woodland projectile points in New York, here, okay, these triangular points here, artifacts recovered from two Lenape rock shelters near Philadelphia, same here, and here artifacts recovered from a Mohawk Indian village. So we see that the continuity of cultures at Dutchess Quarry stems all the way from Paleo times, more than 10, 12,000 years ago, all the way up to contact times with these these projectile points. So here's the famous fluted point from Dutchess Quarry 1, found by George Walters, circa 1965. Okay. You see it's got some weathering on it on one side, and on the other side they cleared it off. And you see here what's so important is this channel flute. Channel flute going all the way up here. So this is what we call in archaeology part of the Clovis tradition. Clovis points, fluted points, were first found out in the west, but now they've been found all over North America, basically, and Central America. I'm not sure if fluted points have been found in South America, but certainly in Central and North America. And this was maybe the first actual invention that occurred here in the Americas, because fluted points like this are found nowhere else, nowhere in Europe, nowhere in Asia. These points are unique to the Americas, to the Paleo-Indian tradition of around 12,000 years ago. And in order to, and I certainly can't even come close to this, to be a flint napper that can make a point such as this with the channel flute on both sides, you have to be a world expert in flint napping to be able to control, you know, your flint chipping process to the point where you can actually make something like this. So to find a fluted point, and others have been found as well, at Dutchess Quarry 1 and Dutchess Quarry 8, but to find a point such as this with this channel flute, part of the Clovis tradition, is just a remarkable discovery, taking us all the way back to Ice Age times, the Ice Age hunters of Lookout Mountain. There's some controversy, which I really won't get into. It's too arcane. It doesn't really matter, but some identify this as a Cumberland-type fluted point. Doesn't really matter to us, right? And others a Barnes-type point. But, you know, whenever in archaeology I see quibbles like that, you know, if you're going to make a point such as this, not manufactured in a factory, you know, if there was some kind of standardized industrial procedure, but all hand manufactured, there's always going to be a variation. They're never going to be two that are exactly identical to one another. So to quibble over whether this is a Cumberland variant or a Barnes variant or whatever is just, to me, nonsensical. It's a fluted point, part of the Clovis fluted point tradition that was a unique American invention 12,000 or so years ago. And for those of you curious about how to manufacture such a point, basically what you do is you take chippable stone, chert or flint, or the best of all, obsidian, you know, with a chipping pattern which you can highly control. You take a nodule and you prepare it so that you can, here's the hammerstone, okay, and you can use softer material like a deer antler for smaller chipping. And basically, you know, to knock off this channel flute on this side, and then the other side without shattering this is you gotta know what, you gotta really know what you're doing. So there's another view of the production of a Clovis point. Okay, you can see here, and then to knock off the channel flute on both sides. And that's what hafting would look like. Now some of these channel flutes go halfway up, some of them go almost all the way up, in which case archaeologists like to call them Folsom points. But again, we're not going to quibble about that. Folsom points are out in the west. But some, and I also kind of subscribe to this, these channel flutes are not only for hafting purposes, but maybe also, as with a military bayonet, in which there's a channel flute going up the bayonet. And why? Because if you're sticking somebody, that channel is going to enhance bleeding and the death of, whatever you're trying to kill. And so maybe the channel flute was also designed to enhance bleeding and to kill an animal faster, quicker, and more efficiently, as another possibility, other than the hafting aspect of it. Another major invention of the Upper Paleolithic, and then by extension, the early humans that migrated to the Americas, was the spear thrower. We use, for some reason, the Aztec word, the atlatl, or spear thrower. Atlatl is an Aztec word from their language, nahuatl. And so, I've actually read an article not too long ago that the reason why migrating Homo sapiens, moderns, coming into Europe from out of Africa, coming across the Neanderthals, and ultimately the Neanderthals disappeared over several thousand years because the Neanderthals had spears, but early modern Homo sapiens, we had spear throwers. And with a spear thrower, as you can see here, as you can see here, you rest it on your shoulder, there's a weight to give it some heft. You take that atlatl dart or spear, and instead of throwing it overhand, you can't get a whole lot of force and power that way, you flip it like so, and you can get far more distance and penetrating power with a spear thrower than you can just by chucking a spear. So it could be that these atlatls also were extremely important as far as killing of the megafauna and their ultimate extinction for most of those huge species during Ice Age times. Many fluted points. I've got another example of the fluted point tradition. Those of you interested, this one is from Oklahoma. Okay, another one similar to the Duchess Corey Point with its long channel flute. This is Duchess Corey 8. There are other smaller caves that have been located at Duchess Corey 7 and so forth, but nothing of much significance has come out of them. Only Duchess Corey 1, which I've just shown you, and Duchess Corey 8. And I was actually involved in the excavations at Duchess Corey 8, circa 1988, 1989, with, again, Dr. Funk from the New York State Museum. So it's a rock shelter. Most of this was covered over with rock and rubble. They knew that there was an entrance and that there was an opening back there through subsurface detection, electrical resistivity surveys, and then ultimately subsurface radar surveys. Anyway, so in 1988, 1989, Duchess Corey 8 was excavated. And some pictures that I took back then of the excavations. This is Bill Ehlers. So as we know, there is a Bill Ehlers scholarship at the college, which I had instituted many years ago. This Bill Ehlers, local archaeologist, wonderful man, died young, died too early, but he was my mentor when I first got to this area in local archaeology. I knew almost nothing about local archaeology, but when I joined the chapter, Bill Ehlers took me under his wing and he showed me the ropes. Great guy. And this is Ed Lennick, who is well known for publishing many books on rock art in this area. Ed Lennick, if you're interested in rock art, and L-E-N-I-K, that's Ed Lennick, who's an expert on rock art. Here's a plan view of Duchess Corey 8. Okay, fluted points coming out of here as well. Possible fire hearth here as well. Other archaic points, no woodland points, caribou bone. I forgot to mention, with Duchess Corey 1, caribou bones were found in close proximity to the fluted point, this one. Those caribou bones were carbon dated to 12,380 plus or minus something like 400 years. There's always a range of error with carbon-14 dating because one amount of carbon, a gram, doesn't decay exactly the same every time. So there's always a range of error with that. But anyway, that carbon date of 12,000, roughly 12,500 years ago, was associated with this point, and that's now very controversial because that's a very, very early date, even for a fluted paleo point. So we're not certain if we can associate that very early date with these discoveries. It's possible, but again, there's some archaeological debate over that. Here are some of the archaeological materials that came out of Dutchess Quarry 8. At this point, I found myself, along with some others. Others fluted points here, where we're lifting up some rock and rubble from Dutchess Quarry 8, and then right underneath it was this broken fluted point right over here. It's incredible. One of the most thrilling finds I've ever made as an archaeologist, was that. Really, so I've done archaeological research in the American Southwest, as my colleague Corey Harris has, and so forth. But to have found that was, just thrilling, really. That's what it looked like. The picture I took. It's the top of a fluted point, broken fluted point. Here's the top. Here's the channel flute top. This part is missing here, and that's yellow jasper. The origin of that stone is way to the south in Pennsylvania. So we know that there were trading patterns and migratory patterns and so forth. Here's some of the bone materials that were found in Dutchess Quarry 8, identified by Stedman, the New York State paleontologist at that time, including giant beaver I mentioned and flat-headed peccary, found here in cave number 8. So I don't know, I was planning on reading this whole thing to you. So I don't know if I have the strength at this point to do that. But let's try to hit the highlights. So the following lists highlights a myriad of reasons why Dutchess Quarry Site's National Register District is nationally significant. Caves 1 and 8 have made significant contributions to understanding and interpretation of the prehistory of the northeastern United States. Caves 1 and 8 have made significant contributions to understanding and interpretation of the post-Pleistocene, post-glacial environment in the Northeast. Cave 1 remains the only known New York site which yielded a sequence of occupation covering the entire prehistoric period from Paleo-Indian to the late woodland. Caves 1 and 8 are the only sites in eastern New York and one of only 3 locations in the entire state that have yielded datable Paleo-Indian subsistence remains, such as caribou bones dated. Caves 1 and 8, only cave or rock shelter sites in New York with confirmed in situ, in place, not disturbed, fluted points. Caves 1 and 8, only sites that have yielded evidence of Paleolithic exploitation of post-Pleistocene fauna, including the possible caribou, and so forth. So it's a really, really important site. Initially, Dutchess Quarry 1 was designated as a National Historic Place, but after other excavations and reports that were done in the early 1990s, that area was expanded, so now it's now a national district. It's an archaeological district and not just a particular site. So the district is eligible for a National Historic Landmark status. That hasn't happened quite yet, but it's an expanded district of 13.2 acres, I believe. So, okay. Here's the expanded county preserve of 13.2 acres. So it's a little hard to read this. This is the blasting area, present quarry over here, over here. The caves are basically located over here somewhere. Now here it says locus 3, locus 5, and so forth. There's a buffer zone. Further archaeological research indicated that in the woods on top of the cave's ledge, if you will, there are chert quarries. Chert's a stone highly prized for flint knapping, and so chert quarry locations were also identified, and that's why they expanded the site to include now a National Register district to include those chert quarries. In fact, some of the chert from one of those locations was found in Dutchess Quarry 1, one of the tools made from that chert, really close by. geologists who have the expertise to identify that sort of thing. This is what the quarry pit looks like right now. Yeah, you can't see it from the road. You can only see it from way up above the ledge, but you can see it. A whole lot of dolomite stone blasted out, and that's why we have our roads. We need this stone for, paving and road surfaces. It's critically important in that way. But that's what the huge pit looks like, more or less right now. And I know many of you are concerned about what's going on at the moment. We can talk more about that with questions and answers if you'd like. But, okay, here are the cave locations over here. 13.2 acres, this is the National Register District. Over here's a buffer zone, there's another buffer zone over here. Here's the quarry pit down over here. And so potential sale of this land, something like 30 acres, 31 acres over here. But this is the protected National Register District right over here with the cave locations, okay, and the quarry pits over here. This is the major scientific resource for those of you who wish to pursue further knowledge, scientific knowledge of Dutchess Quarry excavations, Dutchess Quarry caves, archaeological and paleo environmental investigations in the Dutchess Quarry caves, Orange County, New York by Funk and Stedman. I think it's available on Amazon, pretty sure. Not cheap, but available for those of you interested, or maybe get it for the library, perhaps. And this is a major report. Dave Church, who I knew pretty well back then, was Orange County Commissioner of Planning, and he commissioned the Archaeological Conservancy, right over here, a major national organization devoted to the protection and preservation of archaeological sites around the country. He commissioned, Dave Church commissioned them to, make a big report, history of excavations, and also the potential recommendations for the future of the Dutchess Quarry Caves location. And so this this report is available to the public. Anybody can access it and read it. Just go to orangecountygovernment.com, Document Center, view, put in a search for Dutchess Quarry Sites, National Register District. I can remember this Management and Conservation Report from 2012, but this is online. Anybody can access this. I have a copy here. It's a little lengthy, but this is the last publication that I know of on Dutchess Quarry sites, and this tells you everything you'll ever want to know about all this. So we're going to end off with my mentor in New York State archaeology, who I knew quite well before he unfortunately passed away a number of years ago, Dr. Robert Funk. And in their scientific report, the Funk and Stedman report, the Dutchess Quarry Caves remain, when all is said and done, the only sites in New York State that sample virtually the entire range of the human history in the northeastern U.S. This fact, combined with the rich faunal assemblages and the potential for future research, renders the Dutchess Quarry Caves as a place of national significance. We should protect these caves, the education and research potential of which are nowhere near fully recognized. And that's my son. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. Happy to answer questions. I'll maybe have the answers. You have the questions. Sir?
What was Lookout Mountain originally like in comparison to Adam and Eve, the other mountains in the area?
Well, that's a good question, but I don't actually, I would imagine similar. My wife and I were recently at a music festival at the Warwick Winery, and in the background was Mount Adam, I think. I've never been up there. Mount Eve? Yeah. But I imagine that before Lookout Mountain was essentially blasted into oblivion by the mining operation, it was probably quite similar. I don't think, although I don't know for sure, and if anybody has knowledge of this, please let me know. I don't think that any archaeological materials have been found up on Adam and Eve. I don't.
No.
Is that right?
But there are mine shafts that may be stuff, but nothing in particular.
Okay.
No caves, on Mount Adam, I don't know Mount.
Yeah, I've never been up there, so I don't know. But I would imagine quite similar, again, post-glacial. You know, the trees that we see today, remember, these trees are modern. So what what it would have looked like during paleo times with the fluted point, nothing like today. Again, the environment was completely different. It was, you know, cold adapted. It was more tundra-like, more what we call boreal forest with spruce and pine and fir trees, essentially. Again, the black dirt region was marshland and muckland and swampland. And so if you look at it today, it's nothing like what it would have looked like 10, 15,000 years ago. Yeah?
Why the name Duchess Quarry Caves instead of Orange?
Good question. I don't know. I wasn't there. But that's because of the Duchess Quarry mining operation close by. So I think that the early archaeologists, you know, the Bill Ehlers and George Walters, who went up there initially in the early 1960s, for whatever reason they just referred to this as the Duchess. Well, they didn't know about Duchess Quarry 8 at that time. It was only the one cave, Duchess Quarry 1, so they called it the Duchess Quarry Cave Site. That's all I can tell you.
In terms of archaeological locations, how important is this one relative to all the other ones that are known in the area?
This one is extremely important because of the range of archaeological materials found in place in situ. You know, in other words, in the early 1990s, other archaeological research was done on a field nearby called the Alpine Meadow, and all that was plow zone. So if you find projectile points or whatever in a plow zone, you know it's all been turned over and moved around and not in the original place. And so it's critical in archaeology to find materials, if you can, in situ, right in the place where they were deposited or left or manufactured or utilized or whatever. And so because this range of archaeological materials from paleo through archaic to woodland was found in situ in an undisturbed context, this makes Duchess Quarry 1 especially very important and subject perhaps to future research. Duchess Quarry 8, not so much, because Duchess Quarry 8, according to geological reviews, there was a rock fall, disturbed a lot of material roughly 4,000 or more years ago. There's a rock fall that, you know, created a lot of jumbled material. Remember I told you that yellow jasper point tip that I found with some others was right under a rock fall? So this is a very important site. Now, there's a huge controversy in American archaeology going on today about whether human beings were here before the paleo tradition, the fluted point tradition, pre-paleo, pre-Clovis. There's more and more growing evidence that there were human beings here as early as in the 20 or more thousand years ago. It's not the subject of today's talk, but nothing pre-Clovis has been found. Unfortunately, it'd be incredible if that was true, if we found, you know, archaeological material under that Clovis point in situ, in undisturbed context. Maybe for future research that might happen. Who knows? You need to get out there and dig it up. Sir?
Why is this quarry not protected if it's so important? You have a blasting going on right there, which is vibrating the heck out of everything.
Yeah, good question. So I think that we all should be proud of, don't laugh, I'm serious, Orange County government. Because Orange County government has been involved with the protection and preservation of the National Register District for a long time. And they've allowed excavations to go on there, or site surveys to go on there, all professionally done, of course. They allowed the early chapter members to dig up there, all through permission of Orange County government. And then in 1991, the Orange County legislature formed the Orange County Cave Site Management Committee and appointed me, as well as others, to be on that. And so Orange County government, Lee Benton, if you know Lee, is the chair of this committee. He couldn't be here today, unfortunately. He wanted to. But anyway, what we've done to date over the last couple of years is we put up more fencing around the site, again, I won't tell you exactly where, but to protect and preserve it and not allow, looters or pot hunters up there. And also we have obtained seismographic data from the mining operation from Tilcon. We had to get it through, official channels. A seismograph has been placed in Dutchess Quarry 1, and at this point, all blasting indicates no harm to the cave's ledge from blasting operations.
How do you determine that when our basements are cracking?
Well, all I can say, sir, is that this is not my area of expertise, but along with other committee members, I've seen the reports from Tilcon, and they were interpreted for us. And the measurements in Dutchess Quarry 1 through that seismograph indicates no harmful effects from blasting in the quarry. We've been very aware of this and taking a close look at all of it. Yeah?
Were those seismographs, were they provided by Tilcon?
They were provided by Tilcon. In fact, we were surprised, that is the management committee was surprised when some of our, I wasn't part of this, I couldn't go, some of our committee went up there and found the seismograph that had been placed by Tilcon in Cave 1 and on top of Cave 1 to measure any potential impacts from blasting operations. And looking at the scientific reports, which I have at home, again, the way they were interpreted to us was that there's been no harmful impacts to blasting.
How are the points attached to the shaft?
Using animal gut.
Just wrapped around?
Yeah, just wrapped around, just animal gut.
I imagine you have to be very sturdy.
Yeah.
Get them and pull them out intact.
Yeah, sometimes, not here at Dutchess Quarry, but in other sites out in the west, these kinds of points have been found embedded in such as mastodon bones. So sometimes they came loose, from just the sheer impact of them. But they have to do the best they could, and again, it was always animal products. I know can't you boil, not that they did, horses' hooves and make glue out of that? Some kind of glue from horses' hooves? Sir?
Is there a preservation problem with the water levels at the bottom of the pit, that they always have to be pumped? I read something about that some time ago.
I can't address anything that has to do, I just don't know. I don't know what Tilcon does. I know that there's a reclamation plan when they stop blasting operations. I think they're going to turn that pit into a big pond.
But couldn't that involve the caves? I mean, could that be?
So you ice skaters out there, live long enough, you go ice skating at Dutchess Quarry. Yeah.
I asked what Orange County is going to do about the land for sale there. That was my question.
Okay, the land for sale. That's why I wish Lee Benton was here, because he's more in tune with what's going on in the inner recesses of Orange County government than I am. And we haven't been able to meet for a couple of months now because we're awaiting some kind of data that Lee is trying to obtain and so forth. I hope we meet at the end of this month. But here's what I know. Several years ago, there was a proposal to sell something like 30 acres of wooded slope, not the National Register District, but 30 acres nearby. And then there was a huge uproar and cry from public, you people, about that. And that's been put on hold. I think that's in the county executive's office now, it's put on hold, that sale. And I think they might be awaiting a recommendation from the part of our committee. We're a long way from recommending the sale of that to Tilcon, believe me. And so now I understand that the town of Goshen has offered to purchase not the National Register District, the 13.2 acres and the buffer zone, which will always be, under the aegis of Orange County government. So not to worry about that, where the archaeological district is. But the sale of the land nearby to prevent further blasting in that area, the town of Goshen has offered to purchase that land. I don't know how much of it or, and all that. And I understand, and you can't quote me on this because it's artificial, but there is some growing sentiment within Orange County government to allow the sale of that land for a very nominal fee to the town of Goshen. I think that's in process. Whether it's going to happen that way or not, I can't say or guarantee. But I understand from talking to certain people that there are some people of importance in Orange County government who are in favor of selling or leasing or whatever they're going to do the rest of that land to the town of Goshen for a very nominal fee.
It's on the table, but not discussed with the public or anybody else, so
Right.
it's to be
Yeah,
discussed and.
we haven't even discussed it fully, it's just been mentioned that this is, happening. So it hasn't yet been discussed fully by the management committee at all. But, speaking in private to some people, that's all I can say is that it seems to be a favorable proposal at this point, but I can't guarantee anything. Sir?
Have any human remains been found at this
You
site?
know-
And if they have, are the people continuous with the woodland residents?
Well, that's a great question, because, if you look in here, that is the official scientific report, and what's been found in here is actually one of these tables that indicates a couple of human bones were found. Yeah, a human being. I circled it. Because nothing's ever been mentioned about that, other than on this table. In Cave 1, Stratum 1, which is the top stratum, a couple of small, maybe piece of human being, but no mention of that otherwise in here. So I don't know anything more about it, other than there was a report that some human bones were found. That's it.
But that might have been from relatively recent period, or that was found from these earliest strata?
My guess is some Boy Scouts.
Hi, I was up there a number of years ago on a field trip with somebody named Gary, who was from the Port Jersey area.
Yeah, Gary Keaton.
Yes. And we were allowed to go up there, we were climbing, we got to the caves, we actually went into the caves. And then I heard that that has been shut down, and no one else has visited but he took us on an authorized field trip.
Yeah, no, the Orange County chapter, in conjunction with the Orange County government, had field trips for several years. We would lead field trips up there, but post-COVID, this isn't happening. It's actually a little difficult and even somewhat dangerous to up there, because part of it requires, as my friend Robert will tell you, rappelling down a rope. Yeah, there's no visitation at this point, the Dutchess Quarry Caves. It's just, there are all kinds of issues regarding liability and insurance, because it's county property. And so that's a major issue. Plus, as with so many other organizations, Gary Keaton is no longer in this area. He was, along with me, giving the tours. He's in Maine now. And so the Orange County chapter more or less faded significantly, during COVID times. We're rebuilding now. More and more people are coming to our meetings and joining, which is great. But there's no official visitation at this point.
So there's no official visitation, how are they looking to possibly make that like an educational?
Oh, good
tourist
question.
kind of thing?
Okay, yeah, this is one of the topics our committee is yet to confront, but it's close, we're getting close to it. Our first issues had to do with protection and preservation of the site as it is today, with further fencing and reviewing the seismographic reports and so on. But especially me, associated with SUNY Orange, I'm really interested in transforming this site into an educational resource. It might in the future involve more visitation, it's on the table, but more likely the development of an educational kiosk along the roadside, perhaps, as we see all over the place when we drive in Virginia and other places like that. So all these educational kiosks, and people stop and learn what's happened nearby. Maybe a display in the Orange County Government Building here in Goshen with Joanna Poor, who's the county historian, developing that. But I'm going to insist that we're going to develop these cave sites into a resource for the people, the school children of Orange County, as well as a boon to tourism. Because people love to visit these kind of places and see these kind of things. So this would be a boon all around. So this is very much on the table. What would be the best way to transform these remote and pretty much inaccessible caves into something that is a good educational resource for this region? Sir?
Do you know, there's a couple of other peaks around, I know somebody mentioned Adam and Eve, but there's a few other hills like Sawyer's Peak, which is right behind my house. Do you know if there was ever a survey done once these caves were discovered, that there was a sort of broader circumference of curiosity or scientific research that was done?
There are many archaeological sites that have been found throughout this region. Whether they're, where you particularly mentioned, I have no clue, I have no idea. But there's a resource up in Albany, a state museum, that sort of lists all the known sites of this region. I can't think of the name at the moment of the state archaeologist.
John Lothrop.
Lothrop, okay, thanks. Correct. John Lothrop, Lothrop, and you might contact John Lothrop at the State Museum for further information about any archaeological sites in your particular area.
Sure.
Yeah, it's open to the public, this information. Sir?
Okay. From what you're saying, and it's your understanding that the county is going to maintain the cave sites where you're talking about. That's always going to be with the county
Yes,
law.
as far as I understand, indeed.
If in fact that is the case, long term, who do you see administering, or are there organizations that could take over and develop this to the site that you're looking to for educational purposes and tourism and so on and so forth?
Well, I imagine it could be our management committee that would do that. There's no reason to disband this committee at this point. There's no end point to this committee. So I think the Orange County government, Dutch Quarry Caves National Register District Management Committee, which is the whole title of this, will continue to oversee and administer this. If there's going to be future archaeological research in this National Register District, it will be done professionally, not by local archaeologists, because we don't have the resources or the equipment, the time or human power to do this. But for example, there's a major archaeological research group at SUNY Binghamton that does public archaeology. So we've talked about this. We might invite something like SUNY Binghamton to come and survey the site and see if they want to conduct future, very scientific, very professional excavations, the caves ledge. So but I assume that our management committee will continue to be involved in oversight and protection and development of the site as an educational resource.
Yeah, so then the town of Goshen is supposedly in the throes of doing that, of just protecting or purchasing a buffer area around it.
Yeah, that's what, you should be aware of that. Okay, that the proposal to as far as I understand, again, I wish Lee Benton was here to speak more directly to this topic, but my best understanding is that the attempt to purchase what Tilcon had wanted to purchase was not the National Register District. That will, according to Lee, my discussions with him, is always going to be under the aegis of Orange County government, protected and preserved by Orange County government, which is a good thing. And the sale of the land will be that wooded slope leading up in that direction that Tilcon had wanted to purchase. So the good benefit there would be to prevent further blasting operations in that direction. I'd asked Lee about blasting operations because I thought that they were expanding out to the sides and encroaching more and more on the caves ledge area. But he said that their permit allows for blasting downward. So they're not blasting outward, they're blasting downward.
Yeah, there is negotiations going on with the town of Goshen now to purchase that.
Right.
What will happen, I really couldn't tell you, but there are ongoing negotiations for that.
Yeah, as I understand, and again, the negotiations, it should be understood that those negotiations involve the sale of the land, not including the caves registered district, but land nearby. Well, Jim?
Another potential site for archaeologists in Goshen is the site where there was a fort during the American Revolution on top of a hill. And not many people know about it. The irony is that the road that goes past that hill is named Fort Hill Road. And up on top of that, there's a monument that was put by, I think, the Menacing Chamber, or Menacing Chapter of the DAR, I think it was. But that was part of a series of stations. The idea was that if the British fleet went up the Hudson, they wanted to get the word to New England so that soldiers would be sent. So there were a series of fire towers. And that was one of the sites. They probably were sending their signal over to Beacon and so on, up to Boston. But since the soldiers were there for several years, there probably would be in the ground there some interesting things that were left, but that has not been researched.
I think back then Bill Johnson would never allow you to do that. I grew up on Johnson's dairy farm.
Well, I know Phil Johnson, and he's interested.
Phil might, but his dad would never.
Well, I think it's Phil's land now.
Yeah.
Plenty of archaeology to be done out there. That would be historical archaeology.
Yeah.
My interest and expertise lies in prehistoric archaeology, actually. Well,
Barry,
yes.
just one quick one. You've mentioned your committee several times.
Yes.
Could you just talk a little bit about the other members of the committee so they hear their names?
Okay. I have a problem with names. I know I actually do. And the reason for that is that when I taught full-time at SUNY Orange for many, many years, every semester I had something like 150 new students. And I always tried to remember everybody's name so I could interact with them personally. And so I had to learn something like 14 million names. The part of my brain that has to do with name retention just spits it right back out. So I'm sorry. There's Stephanie Benson, who was the former chair of the Orange County chapter. There's Dave Johnson, who's the current president of the Orange County chapter. So the three of us in the Orange County chapter on this committee. There's Lee Benton, county legislator. There's Barry Cheney, who is the county attorney, I believe. There's another man who's in charge of Orange County Parks, park commissioner. He's involved. For a while, although he had to drop out because of medical issues, there was Larry O'Brien, who was a retired professor of geology at the college, SUNY Orange, but he had to withdraw. And there's another, what's his name? Goodness gracious. He's in county government as well. Another interested party, but I'm sorry, I can't remember his name at the moment. But he's in the Democratic minority. So whenever he walks in, you know, we're giving him strange looks. Can't remember his name. It's a small committee.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's about
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, listen, sir.
My wife is afraid to ask the question, so I'll ask you. What happened to where were all the dinosaurs? Dinosaurs? Things like that.
My favorite singer, Dinosaur. Dinosaurs, they were all clamoring to get into the Museum of Natural History. The dinosaurs became extinct roughly 66 million years ago, and there is zero, zippo, nada, not a darn connection between anything resembling a dinosaur and human beings, except for, starts with B and ends with birds, birds. Birds are viewed as, you know, evolutionary descendants of the dinosaurs. Some of the dinosaurs have been discovered to have had feathers, etc. So the dinosaurs, the ones we think about, Tyrannosaurus Rex and so forth. Incidentally, along those lines, I highly recommend the new Godzilla movie. But sorry, no dinosaurs need apply. Well, thank you everybody for coming today.